Recording now. Hi, so welcome to the July 19th, 2016 group webinar, and let's begin. So based on feedback that I've gotten, we're back to the live calls, and also feedback would be about applying information during the call, so we're going to do that as well. And further feedback, I asked some feedback about the transcripts. And the reason I was asking about that is because those transcripts take me about 3 hours minimum to produce. And I didn't want to do those unless there's really some perceived value for that. And the feedback that I've gotten so far is that there's really not that much value to support that. What do you guys think? Any feedback on the transcripts? Does that matter to you if I don't produce those?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
Because your recordings are recorded, you can go back and listen to them.
Right. I did get some good feedback about the transcripts can be made into a book, because it takes, there's a lot of research and a lot of work that goes into making these webinars. And I sure don't mind doing that because it keeps me on the leading edge. It keeps me sharp in the field to constantly be doing the research, which I'm going to be doing anyway. But I like the webinars live for you guys because it gives me a deadline. This webinar is going to be launched here and needs to be done and so forth. So anyway, let's begin our program, and let's see how we're doing here. So this is the second call for the month, second webinar, and the back to the live. We're going to bring back, as we have time, we're going to bring back some hot seats. I guess I shouldn't call it hot seats, because that gives a connotation that it's going to be you're under the gun. So it's going to be coaching that will bring back. I don't believe we're going to have time on this call because I have concepts that we're talking about. So if we have time, I'll set that up. One of the next calls, I want to go over coaching concepts so that everybody is prepared to really be an analyst, to see why I coach the way that I do and what the principles are underneath this. So we'll get that content in. The next calls, as you can see, for August we'll keep them on Tuesday live unless my travel schedule means I need to change it. And so the 2nd and the 23rd, and I have these links posted in the members area, and there may be a case, just to give you a heads up, there may be a time where I have a last minute booking, and if that's the case and I can't make the live call and we can't move it, then that will be a time when I would go back to recording. So just bear with that if it ever has to happen and I need to do a recording in advance. Okay, so moving forward, let's do a check-in. Now, did you have a chance to listen in on the last webinar that we did? Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you have a chance, anybody have a chance to do this thought experiment? Is this group familiar with conversation where I ask a question and you respond with something related to the question? All right, so no one had a chance to do this. It's really very interesting to do this demonstration. This was, I'm looking for his name, for the life of me, his name, let me see if I can get the doctor, the research scientist, to put this together. Anyway, I don't want to take the time to look for it. When I find it, you'll be the first to know. But anyway, this was done by a research scientist, and of course it goes along my theory about how important our thoughts are and how our thoughts definitely impact the world around us. So can't find it handy, but I'll find it later. But anyway, and one of the, now I'm taking it personal, hold on a second. I got it, okay. This was done by Larry Dorsey, Dr. Larry D-O-S-S-E-Y. And what I like about this is it takes So go back and look at the last webinar, the July, what was it, July 5th webinar, where I go over this in more detail. But basically, we're getting an egg carton that's cardboard. We're getting potting soil. We're getting bean seeds. You can get all that easily. And then it was a thought experiment. So to the left, we had positive thoughts. In fact, you can see the thoughts. I did this with my family. This is actually in my kitchen. And I will that the beans on the left side grow faster than the beans on the right. I love the beans on the left, grow faster. I hate the beans on the right, grow slower. Love and gratitude, left. The right is hate, despise. And it's had my kids do this. I had my whole family do this, just go by, and we watered it the same. Everything was the same except for the thoughts that we projected to the left and to the right. And we started to see some growth. And then I had a trip where I was gone. And when I came back, here's what I saw when I came back. Only 2 days. I was gone for 2 days. Look at this. This is substantial. If you draw a line right down the center, this is substantial results. The seeds on the left grew taller than the seeds on the right. And I want everyone, I would love to invite you to do this and prove it to yourself. It's one thing to have theory, and it's another thing to actually see the results of this. So the theory is that your thoughts are energy, your thoughts are real, your thoughts create your reality, your thoughts have an impact in the universe, in this universal energy, and then you look at this and you see it. And there's been a lot of other research that I've done that you've seen and that I share with you on the previous call, the previous webinar. So check that out. Go back and look at that webinar. And I have posted a description of this in the documents area of the website. So check this out. Check it for yourself. I think it's you have a lot of fun with this, and the impact of negative thinking. You'll have a lot of fun with this with your family. One other or a couple other check-ins, and this check-in here is I was reading some information on turmeric. And turmeric does all kinds of healthy, beneficial things, such as neuron protective properties, removes the effects of oxidative stress. So as you are breaking down nutrients, there's a release of oxidation that's happening, and that becomes stressful. Prevents a clumping of proteins, which is a precursor for Alzheimer's. Prevents cell death. So just turmeric. So you can get this easily in the grocery store. So recommendation is to grab one of these and put some of this in your salads. And so there it is. So I received an email that's going to start us off today. The email is not from somebody in this program, but from somebody who's in my one-on-one coaching. And actually, this is the son of another client, and this person is in graduate school, and he's studying, well, not graduate school, he just finished law school, and he's studying for the bar. And the email is this: I started to feel a plateau. And I have it down here for us. I'm starting to feel a plateau we were talking about, and I need a way to shake it off. I realize that in part means going at it with less vigor so I don't burn out. Even so, my focus isn't as sharp as it was a few weeks ago. And he goes on to say, I don't want to arrive at the exam day only half engaged. So again, he's studying for the bar. So he is referencing something that we talked about, and it's been on, we talked about this on our April call. Here's another example of the plateau, which would be, I started off with my weight management program and lost 7 pounds right away, and then I couldn't help myself and I binged, so the plateau. And so the analogy for the plateau, and as I talk about this, think about where you might be experiencing this plateau, this you. And of course, there are the drugs. Just say no to the drugs, which is flour and sugar. And this is an identity, because flour and sugar is just something, when I go off of my bright lines, when I go off of my food plan and I have a binge, let's it's going to be grabbing an extra 8 ounces of grapes. I'm on maintenance, I get 8 ounces of fruit. Or it might be grabbing an extra 6 ounces of chicken. That's or an extra 6 ounces of vegetables. That's my off the food plan. Under no conditions will I don't ever see myself eating flour or sugar again. I just don't see it. It's become an identity. And when you look at it in the context that there's really not much difference between flour and sugar, because it is a processed product. It's a processed plant, which is the same thing when it's ground up into its fine granule existence. That's the same way that heroin is processed. So the poppy, if someone chews on a poppy seed, they're going to have some energy and they're going to get a peaceful feeling, but they're not going to get high and addicted. But when you take that poppy and flour and you grind it into its fine granule form, which is the powdered heroin, now it becomes a drug, it becomes addictive. Same thing with the coca leaf. The coca leaf by itself is chewed by millions of people in Peru, and they don't get addicted, they don't get high, but you ground that coca leaf up into its pure substance, and it's cocaine, and it's very addictive. So saying no to drugs is an identity. But let's get to this inverted U. When we start any project, we have a clear view of our goal. And so we're here, we're starting. Remember, you can go back and view for more detail on this, view the April 19th webinar, but we're starting here and we can see what we want. We can see the target. As we start to get into the process and to executing the activities, we get down to a plateau. That plateau right there means we can't see our goal. We look straight ahead, we see more obstacles, we see more effort. And so what is it going to take when we are at the plateau, like in the example of stated on this page, where the person started to lose weight, but they're kind of stuck right now? Or my student who's prepping for the bar, and that's his full-time job, is prepping for his test. But he's a bit of burned out, he's at a plateau. Wherever you are, you're at the plateau. And so I want to give you several strategies for how to get through this plateau. Because again, visualize yourself in this circumstance. You can't see the end result. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. What you see is more darkness. Well, there's a concept, I didn't put it on this slide, but the concept is called KOKO. That's an insurance, a financial concept. Do you know what that means, Ken or John? KOKO? No. Well, it stands for keep on keeping on. At least I think it was originated in financial services. So keep on keeping on. And this goes into my philosophy that it is process versus outcome. A focus on the day-to-day activities and having the best version of yourself show up for the day-to-day activities. Doing these day-to-day activities in excellence, that is what we're looking for, as opposed to the quick fix of seeing the results. And this is the ability to delay and maintain persistent effort. And if you maintain persistent effort, you will work your way out of that plateau, and then all of a sudden you can see the goal that you're shooting for. And so as opposed to, it's going to require belief and faith versus fear, doubt, and insecurity. Now, belief and faith versus fear, doubt, and insecurity. Now, I'm studying I believe it's called the Book of Miracles. You ever heard of that before? Anybody? No. Book of Miracles. There is a 9-hour study on the Book of Miracles, which I am doing that research so you don't have to. But anyway, it talks about when your actions are driven by fear, almost always it's going to be a bad result. But when your actions are driven by love, and in this case it would be belief, and faith, when your actions are driven by love, then you're going to have a positive result. So think about that for a second. What you're doing right now in your business, what you're doing in your health, in your personal life, if your actions are driven by fear, it's going to lead to a negative outcome. If your actions are driven by a positive approach, by love, by gratitude, by belief and faith, it's going to lead to a positive outcome. Now, these are laws of physics, so I'm not just jumping into Pollyanna. I'm looking at scientific principles. And so the other thing that comes with this is a decision plus persistence, which really is equal to grit. And in terms of our wellness program, it's a decision that we've made. We don't eat flour and sugar. So my wife brings in a yogurt, a Mountain High yogurt like I eat, and she says, and it's called vanilla flavored Mountain High yogurt. And she said, don't eat any of this. And I look at that, and I say, and I look at the ingredients, and it's got the first ingredient is yogurt, second ingredient is sugar. Of course, when they put the vanilla flavor in, they added sugar. And I said, do you know it has sugar in this? And what does she say? Yeah, that's why it tastes good. And so you don't have to worry about me eating that because I've made a decision. I don't eat flour and sugar. And I hope that all of you have made that decision. Now, I have a lot of people in the program who make deals, negotiations within the bright lines of the program. And what I'd like to have everybody do is not do that. Just follow the exact program. Excuse me a second. Don't know what to do when I have to blow my nose and I'm recording. So I don't edit these, so I just bless all of you with that bit of information there. But anyway, when so if the decision to make, like I was started to say, is I like to have everybody follow the bright lines, follow the program exactly, weigh and measure 3 meals a day, no snacking in between, nothing after. This way you have your boundaries until you get to maintenance. When you get to maintenance, then you can start adding in a grain like rice or potatoes. You can start adjusting your volumes and seeing what happens to your weight. If I stayed just with the bright lines of this program, if I just ate the 3 meals as weighed and measured, I would go down. I would lose too much weight because the lowest I've ever been is 172, and that's too low. And so I was giving myself unlimited salads. I was giving myself 8 ounces of steamed vegetables. I was giving myself 7 ounces of protein. And once you get into maintenance, you can start to adjust and you can start to see how does this affect your weight. For example, when I went into maintenance, and remember what maintenance is, take your height, and the first 5 feet of height, give yourself 100 pounds. Each inch taller, men give yourself 7 pounds per inch, women give yourself 5 pounds per inch taller, and that's your maintenance weight, plus or minus 5 pounds. And so I remember when I first got into maintenance, so for me, 5'10 and a half, that's in the high 170s. I added in rice, 4 ounces of rice with lunch and dinner, and I started gaining weight, so I took it out. If you start to put weight back on beyond what your maintenance point is where you want to be, then you just ask yourself, what are you doing that's different? And then stop doing it. It's interesting, go to a doctor, when I do this, it hurts. He says, well, then don't do that. I just experienced that, by the way, with my shoulder. My shoulder pain was so severe that my last cortisone shot didn't do anything to relieve the arthritis in my right shoulder. And then I looked at, well, what am I doing that's aggravating it? I'm doing barbell bench press. All right, stop doing that. So I stopped doing it, and guess what? Shoulder pain isn't severe anymore. So sometimes I think we get stubborn to our habits, don't we? But anyway, I want to talk about grit. This is a paradox because grit means, I'm going to read a definition of grit to you, but grit means keeping on with the work. But at the same time, we get into a rut where there's a fine line of what that peak performance zone is. So let's look at grit. And grit is most made famous or brought to our awareness by Angela Duckworth, a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, I love Angela Duckworth. One thing that I love about her is that she's a really good speaker. So she's easy to listen to. And I think I have about a 9-hour video of grit that I'm previewing, so you don't have to. But anyway, she says the questions are, why are some people more successful than others? Talent is a common answer. And you heard this before, that Calvin Coolidge said, talent isn't the difference. The world is filled with very talented people who are unsuccessful. He says that intelligence isn't the difference. The world is filled with very intelligent people who are unsuccessful. Education isn't the difference. The world is filled with educated derelicts. What's the difference? Well, Coolidge's word isn't grit. His word is persistence. But one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. It was grit. And I'll read a definition of grit. And by grit is defined as perseverance and passion for long-term goals. And this is based on biographical collections of famous leaders in history, researchers, scientists. They've reached similar conclusions about high-achieving individuals. Those individuals who are deemed more successful and influential than their contemporary counterparts typically possess traits above and beyond that of normal ability. While ability was still critically important, these individuals also possessed zeal and persistence of motive and effort. Think about that. Persistence of motive and effort. Grit is considered to be a crucial differentiator. Grit is conceptualized as a stable trait that does not require immediate positive feedback. And if we go back to the U, when you're down there in that plateau, you're not getting immediate positive feedback. Individuals high in grit are able to maintain their determination and motivation over long periods despite experiences with failure and adversity. Their passion and commitment towards the long-term objective, let me read it again, their passion and commitment towards the long-term objective is the overriding factor that provides the stamina required to stay the course amid challenges and setbacks. Now, think about that. That doesn't always have to be applied to business. But what is not negotiable is that there is this grit in our lives. We have to have this grit to stay healthy. And the overriding factor, their passion and commitment towards a long-term objective, is that overriding factor. So wherever you are in your life, there's got to be that passion and that commitment to, let me read it again, the passion and commitment towards a long-term objective. We've got to have that. It's not an option that we don't have that. So if it's not in your business, it's got to be somewhere else. For me, I have developed where I just have this absolute passion for learning. And I just want to keep on learning, keep on learning, keep on, and look at the changes that are happening so fast. I wonder what, I plan on being healthy the next 20 years, and I can't imagine the changes in our society of what we take for granted today that we didn't have just 10 years ago. It's just absolutely amazing, and the ongoing research that keeps happening. But let's continue on with some considerations about grit, because one of the other things that we need to keep in mind is that there's a zone of peak performance. And this we talked about in the, let me move something so I can see. We talked about this in the January 5th webinar. A couple of coaching commandments that we came up: no judgment, it's not good or bad, it just is. You have far more capacity to create the circumstances and the events in your life than you are aware of. And then we talked about struggle negates. where do you need to surrender? And this brings us to the relationship between effort and results. Do you remember this? So when I ask people what the relationship is between an increase in effort and what happens to your results, the most common response that people say is it's linear, 1-to-1. As you increase effort, you increase the results that you get. And the reason that people think that is because it starts off that way, where you do increase effort, you do get better results, and more increased effort, more results. But then, as you know, you get a point in time where you're right here at this plateau, where a further increase in effort is going to decrease results. And what we want to do is we want to recognize this peak performance zone right in here. And this peak performance zone gives us a reference point. If we're below it, we're not putting in enough effort, we're not getting the best results. We need to increase our efforts. But if we're beyond it, we need to back down. So below the threshold of the peak performance, a tipping point, we need to amp it up, not making enough calls, not doing enough exercise, whatever it might be. If we're over here too much, need to amp it down. So going back to the example with the student studying for the bar, he was overtraining. He was overstudying. Just like my son with his freshman football, I was working him and his legs were sore. Well, we were over here. We were at the extreme range. We needed to back it down a little bit, otherwise he's not going to be able to practice. So it's this peak performance zone that is really a place where we are in what's called flow. So let's look at the concept of flow. If you're looking at flow, is a relationship between challenge and skill. And where you don't have flow is where you have too high of a challenge and too low of a skill. When you are in an activity that has this going on, you have anxiety because the challenge is too much for you. It's creating too much of a pressure point for you. And likewise, when the challenge is too low and the skill is too high, now you have boredom. So flow is really the matching of the skill and the challenge. But if you look at the title here, it says flow is not desirable. Well, why is flow not desirable? Ken, flow is not desirable, and the reason I point this out to you because of this state that you are in your business. But flow is not desirable because flow is a comfortable state. Growth doesn't happen when you're in flow. You want to be in a scenario where your challenge is slightly beyond your skill. So this goes to being uncomfortable. So I'm going to review this. We went over this in the last webinar as well. This is you, and this circle around you represents the dynamic tension of a comfort zone. When we butt up against this and we start to visualize a rubber band starting to stretch, as you stretch that rubber band, there's tension to get back. And so the outside of our comfort zone is fear. The outside of our comfort zone is pain. And the normal homeostatic response that's genetically coded in all of us is once we feel this tension to get back to where we're comfortable, which is why we have a coaching commandment that says be uncomfortable every day. But if you look at this, fear is really a great sign. Fear it's like the poker player, the tell. You can tell when a poker player has a great hand if their eyebrow lifts or they touch their chin. There's some kind of a tell that they go through subconsciously. And on the other side of fear and the other side of pain is optimization, the best version of that you can be. On the other side of pain is your infinite potential, the other side of fear. And so the practicing is going through the fear. And again, my son has given me opportunities to express this. As he's tired and he feels pain, that's a sign of growth. That's a sign that you're getting close to breaking through to your biggest potential, to your best version. And so the mantra is, bring it on. You start to feel uncomfortable. I love pain. Pain sets me free. Pain leads to growth and connects me to a higher purpose. Think about this. Think about this, and this is the application of when you perhaps have a craving. Well, what are you having? Is it really a craving, or is it a fear of being hungry? And I like to suggest that it's a fear of being hungry. And so what we want to do is not, our goal is not to be in flow. Our goal is to stretch ourselves, to stretch that dynamic tension so that we're constantly learning, we're constantly increasing our skill level, no matter what the application, and constantly stretching ourselves so that we're in a healthy, not so stretched that you're going to snap, but in a constant stretch so that you're constantly moving that comfort zone so that you can go through the perception of fear and you can optimize and you can be the best that you can be. So this is the desired result. And so let's go back and let me answer some of the questions that my client had about studying for the bar. And that is, how can he get himself back into what you're seeing on the screen right now, which is an extended skill versus challenge. The skill is slightly, not overwhelmingly so, but slightly beyond, the challenge is slightly beyond the skill level. Well, one of the things that is key is to constantly focus on process versus outcome. We live in a society that says, oh, it's outcome, it's outcome. What's the result? And we live in a society that wants immediate feedback. And so I say that we need to train ourselves to be able to be with fear, doubt, and insecurity, to be able to be with what we see as fearful. So let's go back to our wellness, the way that we eat. So I get a sensation. What's my natural response is to stuff the sensation with food, change how I feel. But according to this, let's just have that tension. Let's be comfortable living in the state of tension, because that's a sign that I'm growing, that I'm getting better. And so sustain the activity. So one way is a thinking, it's a mindset of embracing the feeling, bring it on. I'm closer to growth. A second solution is the mindset. It's all mindset. But a second solution is stay in the present moment. So process versus outcome is constantly present moment focused as opposed to future focused. Now, we do need to have a balance between instant gratification and delayed gratification. It's an admirable trait to be looking towards the future and to be delaying instant gratification, but that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about process versus outcome. Process means, what do I need to do today? Focus on that present moment. So I want to give you a story that I just love. This story. It's the Buddhist and the strawberry is the name of the story. And the legend goes like this. A Buddhist is being chased by a lion, and he comes up to a cliff, he sees a vine, he grabs the vine, throws himself over the cliff, and looks up, and there's the lion waiting to kill him if he were to climb back up. Looks down, and there's another 2 lions at the bottom waiting for him to fall, and they're going to kill him. They're all hungry. And he looks up at the vine, and he has 2 mice on each side of the vine gnawing away at the vine. So if you look at this, one way to interpret this is that this guy is, what's a word I can use in public? I don't know, screwed. This guy is in some pretty
Doomed.
bad, what's that?
Doomed.
There, that's a good word, thanks. This guy is doomed, right? But he has the state of mind to notice a strawberry growing out of the side of the mountain. And he reaches over and he picks that strawberry and he takes a bite, and it's just luscious, and it just savors the bite of that strawberry. And think about it. If he goes if he thinks about the past, there's a line at top waiting for him. If he thinks about so he's going to panic. If he thinks about the future, there's 2 lines at the bottom waiting for him. And not only that, he's got 2 mice gnawing away at his vine. So the present moment, now if you look at this, there is no panic in the present moment. There is no fear in the present moment. And you can apply this if you think about something that you're noticing your internal dialogue and you don't particularly like doing something. Well, that's a projection to the future. If I keep on doing this, I can't stand it. Or it's a projection back to the past. I've been doing this for so long. If you stay in the present moment, there's no emotion. There is no fear, there's no desire, there's nothing but purely being present to the activity that you are doing right now. So we're going to come back and review this, but that is one way of application here. And that is that one way to get out of the plateau is to stay focused in the process and stay focused on what you're doing in the present moment, and also notice if you're, I guess you could say, overtraining. Now, another concept that you've heard before, so this is a review, is to make waves. And that is the sprint jog. And this goes to my client who was overtraining. The sprint is an intense activity. And science tells us that we can only maintain a sprint of intense activity for about 90 minutes. Then we need to have a jog. And the jog is recovery. And the recovery can be any length of time, whatever you need, 15 minutes. It can be a couple different things. It can be a change of the activity. So if I'm intensely prospecting, let's say, then I can read personal emails. That's a jog. Or I can go outside and see if the mail has come and read my mail. Or I can just take a 15-minute nap, or just do some other type of a task that's not requiring mental energy, because our brain is very energy sensitive. And so the sprint jog, and then we start another wave of sprint, 60 to 30 minutes to 90 minutes, and then another jog, and then a sprint. And we can have 4 or 5 of these intense periods in our day. So a concept is called bookend your days. And bookend your days, you have control of your AM, you have control of your PM. You might not necessarily have control of what the distractions are or the priorities are that are going in between. But you certainly can bookend your days. You can have a routine in the morning, which we have. You can have a routine in the evening, and you can follow the making waves of the sprint jog in between. So another thing to keep in mind when we talk about getting out of the plateau, getting out of a stalled position, is the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are always the same: eat, sleep, and move. How are you eating? And I just can't imagine people that are eating flour and sugar. There's a sensitivity scale. And if you're 0 to 10, if you're 1 or 2, then you can eat flour and sugar and you're not going to get addicted. You're not going to have this tremendous inflammatory response. It's just like not everybody dies from cigarette smoking. There are some people who smoke into their hundreds, and they've been smoking for 60 years. So not everybody dies from cigarette smoking. However, those who do die of cancer, there's a very high correlation to cigarette smoking. Same thing here. Flour and sugar doesn't wreak havoc with everyone, but with diabetes, with the cardiovascular disease, there's a very high correlation to flour and sugar. Does that make sense? I hear everybody saying yes. Okay. So anyway, it's the fundamentals: eat, sleep, and move. So we eat properly. We have a routine. We have a schedule for eating. We have a plan for eating, just like we have a plan for our business and a routine and a system. We sleep. I don't know if you are guilty of not getting enough sleep. I know sometimes I have a tendency to get less than 6 hours of sleep. And it just seems with the, thank Edison for the invention of the light bulb, and with all the technology that we have, we're getting less and less as a society, less and less sleep. We need between 7 to 9 hours of sleep because of all the physiology, which I won't go into here, but what happens with our neurological processes when we're sleeping. Got to have enough sleep. And that means that we need to prioritize it and we need to plan for it and commit to it. And then movement. With the high intensity exercise, the latest research states that it's not how long you exercise, it's how intense you exercise. And so as long as we're with our fundamentals, and then and again, process versus outcome, focusing on the activities that we're doing without the immediate feedback, application of grit. So one more review, and then we'll do a bit of application. And so this is from the last call. Fear is both good and bad. And I just wanted to remind you that we are predisposed for negativity. Because if you look at brain activation, something positive happens, we get this much, maybe about 2 units of brain activation to somebody who says something nice to us. But somebody who says something negative to us, we get more than twice the activation, negative units of activation. So we are predisposed as a species to have negativity stick onto us like Velcro, and to have positive bounce off of us like Teflon. And so just to know that this is our predisposition, to see and pay attention to the negative. Well, knowing this means that we have to have an intervention to cancel this and to focus on positive thinking. So let's go and have a review and implement. So my thoughts, the first one, we're talking about the thought experiment with the bean seeds. So what does that mean to you? If your thoughts are real and they matter, how would you implement that for the next 2 weeks before our next call or so? Anybody?
Well, stay positive and then just keep repeating to yourself positive thoughts, or repeating your goal to yourself.
Right. Okay. Can anybody think of an instance where you notice, let's go back to this, where you noticed the natural tendency to be negative, but where you did just what Ken suggested, is that you realize your thoughts are real and you brought it back to something positive? Can anybody think of an example of that, where that's happened in your life?
Let me think.
So think about a time where your natural reactionary response was negative, but knowing what you know, this is called emotional regulation. We're looking at skills to create the space between the stimulus and how we respond, and to get out of this automatic neurological patterning that we have, that we default to, which is to have very stressful responses. So it can be anything, can it? I walk into the house, my wife was gone for a week camping with my son. She likes to camp with the Boy Scouts. She's a leader with the Boy Scouts. Me, I like air conditioning, but anyway. And she finally came back, and now the house is messy again. So what's different? Well, before it was just myself and my daughter. Now my son and wife are back and the house is messy. So I notice myself automatically reacting with something negative, and I'm about ready to say something to my wife that's negative, but I catch myself realizing that my predisposition is to look at this with a negative interpretation, as if a lion was chasing me, as if my life was in danger. Instead, I just ask if I can help put some things away. And it's a much different response. So how about this? Let's go and look at flow and comfort zones. How does this apply to your life? Knowing about flow and my statement that flow is not desirable, knowing that flow is a relationship between your challenge and your skill. How would you apply this? That the suggestion is to embrace being uncomfortable, to look at fear as a sign of growth. Bring it on. I love pain. Any ways, any suggestions about application here?
Say it again, Bob.
So the concept of flow and comfort zones, how would that apply to you? Where my recommendation is that flow is a comfortable state and not desirable. That you constantly want to keep your challenge slightly higher than your skills.
So I could tell myself or set a goal every week that I'm going to make 2 more appointments a week.
Well, all right, one application would be your minimum level commitment, and then the stretch, which would be a little bit more than that, where you're being held accountable to the minimum level, but you're stretching beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be an example of that. Ken, anything come to mind?
Oh, it happens to me every day. But the one that's obvious is years ago when we were young and starting out with 0 clients. You had to cold call. Remember, you had to cold call? You hated it, afraid, rejection. But if you didn't cold call, you're not going to ever get any clients. Things are different these days, but that used to be a nightmare.
That's right. And for anyone who's growing their business, that still is appropriate. And that would be the same thing here. The losing sight of the goal in the U, the losing the sight down below here. And it's just the grit. It's the persistence. It's a decision. It's the willingness to proceed even though you don't see the result right now. How about, so what about grit? How does grit, that concept of the willingness to proceed without seeing the result, anybody experiencing that right now?
Well, I did. When my dad was sick, and I wasn't working at all. And then after everything was done, I just went back to my normal routine. I didn't see results for a month, but I got good results a month later.
That's the common application. I mean, that is the application of this. Just grit is focusing on the process and persistent activity. And how about this? How about struggle negates? Anybody notice themselves either submax or beyond the comfort zone, not the comfort zone, the peak performance zone? So according to today's information, we want to be just beyond that peak performance zone because this is not desirable. This is kind of a paradox. It's desirable to be at your best version of yourself. But the statement is that in order to be at the best version of yourself, you need to be in the realm of uncomfortable, where your challenge is slightly higher than your skill. And for me, this is just constant learning. It's interesting that I will never arrive at knowing everything there is to know about human behavior. Just like I'll never arrive at knowing everything there is to know about being a pilot. There's always more to learn. How do anybody else feel that way in your life? Anything specific to add?
Well, we're always challenged in my business anyway to keep up with current events and different market techniques and different market segments, and so there's constantly learning.
That is just, it's one of the most fascinating things that I've ever seen, is that one of our coaching commandments is that you're either growing or decaying. There is no middle ground. And that is a principle of physics. That's a principle of nature. Growing or decaying, there is no middle ground. There is no standing still. There is no arriving. If you remember one of the previous programs that we had, let's see, I can give you where this, I'm looking for asymptote. And asymptote, let me see if I can find this quickly, is where a straight line and then a line curving up to meet it, that line will never meet it. You will never arrive at that straight line. Let me see where this is in case you want to review it. Asymptote was on the June 21st call. It's a geometry line will never meet. It's so like excellence. Excellence is if you look at straight line going across, I will come close to it and I will get close to it, but I will never reach pure excellence. It's always something that is striving for. So review the June 21st webinar to get more information on that. But anyway, what about struggle negates? So it really seems that this is a balancing act, and this leads right into the next one, which is the Buddhist strawberry. So anybody, did you see this in your life where either struggle negates and how you might solve it with present moment? Because that's what the Buddhist strawberry story is all about. Any comments about that? No comments. Okay. Okay. So the next concept that I have is about split brain. I'll give you a little bit. We're not going to have time to finish this, but I'll start it, and I'll make sure that our next program, which is going to be August 2nd, that we really dive into split brain. Let me give you an overview introduction to this. And I want to start by playing a video. And I wish me luck on this because I had to get support help on this. So we're going to play it.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to play this video. And you should be able to see this. Here we go.
I grew up to study the brain because I have a brother who has been diagnosed with a brain disorder, schizophrenia. But on the morning of December 10, 1996, I woke up to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. A blood vessel exploded in the left half of my brain. And in the course of 4 hours, I watched my brain completely deteriorate in its ability to process all information. If you've ever seen a human brain, it's obvious that the two hemispheres are completely separate from one another. And I have brought for you a real human brain.
I like to get one of these myself.
Thank you.
We can all use an extra brain.
This will be such a great demonstration.
This is a real human brain. This is the front of the brain, the back of the brain with the spinal cord hanging down. And this is how it would be positioned inside of my head. And when you look at the brain, it's obvious that the two cerebral cortices are completely separate from one another. For those of you who understand computers, our right hemisphere functions like a parallel processor, while our left hemisphere functions like a serial processor. The two hemispheres do communicate with one another through the corpus callosum, which is made up of some 300 million axonal fibers. But other than that, the two hemispheres are completely separate.
And this, she goes on to say that all right, so we're done with the video sharing. Where's my, okay, so everybody was able to see that, yes?
Yep.
Okay, very good. And so anyway, she goes on to say that these two parts of our brain have two different personalities. And what we're going to explore on the next call is what those two different personalities are. Because what we have is we have interpersonal conflict is what results of this. And this is a great, now the two parts of the brain, left hemisphere and right hemisphere, are connected. This is the corpus callosum she was talking about. But what we're going to do is, now when she had her stroke, her entire left brain was offline. But don't worry about her. She's all right now. Everybody get that? That was pretty good. That's a real good joke. Left brain was offline, but she's all right now. Anyway, it's, what we're going to talk about next time is what the world was like when she saw the world with her left brain. Then we're going to go into some research because when we are having difficulties, remember the concept that I have about lead with your identity, not how you feel. Most people lead with how they feel. Alarm goes off at 3:50 in the morning. I don't feel like going to the gym. Leading with how I feel, most likely I'm going to sleep in.
Okay, hold on.
If you don't, and we'll be ending in about 2 minutes. If you don't feel like making a call, we're not going to make the call. And what we're going to see is that when we are not getting ourselves to be in the highest level of activity, excellence, it is interconflict between left brain and right brain. So that's what we're going to pick up on the next call. And all right, so remember, this will be recorded if you want to. And what I recommend everybody is let me be your researcher. Be a student of my stuff. Be a student of my research. Listen to these webinars. Go back in the archives. I'll do the research for you. Let me be the source for you in ongoing learning. We'll pick it up from here on the next call, on the August 2nd call. So everybody make applications. How can you apply this in your week this week? How can you apply this next week? And I do recommend her book, by the way, Stroke of Insight, Jill Bolte Taylor. And we'll see you on the next call. So thanks for either viewing this if you're watching the recording, or thanks for being here live. See you on the August 2nd call. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.